The running back position is completely changed now. Not only do we have to update Ramondre Stevenson and Breece Hall, but this has cascading effects throughout the entire league, even moving up the guys in Miami, even moving Tony Pollard up these rankings as well. So I'm going to give you my top 30 rankings to help you dominate in drafts this season. Starting off, Christian McCaffrey at 1. Obviously, nothing's changed, right? I mean, he won us $100,000 in an underdog tournament last year, and he won us $20,000 in a separate underdog tournament last season. Phenomenal running back at a 21% team target share in 2022. Obviously not the same back he was back in the Carolina days, where in 2019 he averaged 150 total yards per game. With that being said though, CMC, you do still have a small red flag, 27 years old. Okay, this is about the point where we have to be worried about the fall off. Also, the usage with and without Elijah Mitchell is a little concerning. In games that Elijah Mitchell played, he only had 10.5 carries per game, whereas Christian McCaffrey averaged 15.5 carries per game with no Elijah Mitchell this past season. So he's not the same running back that he once was, but still an elite level option, still the running back 1 in fantasy. Now, our next guy, Bijan Robinson, is someone that, we're going to have to throw this up. Hook'em horns. We interviewed him at the NFL draft. I saw him at the gym a few weeks back, so I am very biased with this. And I know everybody hates us ranking Bijan Robinson here, right? Their first thing is saying, oh my gosh, Mason, you can't rank a rookie this high. Do you not remember Clyde Edwards-Helaire? Well, I will say Bijan Robinson is 10 times better of a prospect than Clyde Edwards-Helaire was. Bijan Robinson's the best running back prospect that we've seen since Saquon Barkley. And if we go through and look at other running backs that had this much hype as Bijan Robinson going into their rookie year, Saquon Barkley, running back 2 that season. Leonard Fournette, running back 7, Ezekiel Elliott, running back 3, Adrian Peterson, running back 5. So out of that one instance that people are pointing to with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, really all these running backs that have this level of hype going into year 1, they crush. Across the board, they're pretty much top 5 running backs in fantasy. We know this coaching staff wants to lead the NFL in rushing this next year. I'm all in on Bijan Robinson. Now, yes, Austin Ekeler has fallen down our rankings 1 slot to 3. With Ekeler, he was the number 1 flex player in fantasy football last year, but he does have red flags going into this next season. Austin Ekeler is 28 years old. We know that this is historically about the point that we want to be fading running backs. And if we go through and look at NFL history based off the RotoViz screener going back to the year 2000, I had running backs going into their age 28 season that are coming off a similar year to what Austin Ekeler just saw. You had Curtis Martin going from 2000 to 2001. And in that season, Curtis Martin fell just slightly from 19 points per game down to 18.8. You had David Johnson 2018 to 2019, where David Johnson fell from 15.5 points per game down to 12. You had Deuce Staley going from 16 points per game down to 10. You had Lamont Jordan going from 21 points per game down to 8. You had Liddell Betts going from 15 points per game down to 5. I'm not saying Austin Ekeler is going to fall down to 5 points per game, but across the board, every single running back that comps similarly got worse going into their age 28 season. On top of this, if you look at the usage with and without Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, you clearly see why Ekeler was involved so much as a pass catcher last year. There were 7 games where Keenan Allen missed. And in those 7 games, you had Austin Ekeler averaging about 9.5 targets per game. In comparison to games with Keenan Allen, he was only at 6.5 targets. And the same thing with and without Mike Williams. There are 4 games where Mike Williams missed. And in those 4 games, Austin Ekeler averaged 10.5 targets per game. And the games that Mike Williams played, he was down at 6.5. So you should expect that the receiving down role also naturally comes back down for Austin Ekeler with a healthy Mike Williams and a healthy Keenan Allen. And even if one of these guys were to miss time, now you don't have Joshua Palmer going out there. Instead, you have Quentin Johnston, who will be a capable option as a receiver. Obviously, I still like Ekeler. He's a top 3 running back for me, just explaining why he's not our running back 1 like he was last season. Now, going over to our next guy, we are going to be looking at Saquon Barkley. Barkley checks every single box. You don't have to worry about his age. The man's 26. He was a running back 5 last year from a points per game perspective. He had a target share mark of 15.5%. We know that he is involved enough as a rusher. He averaged 18.4 carries per game last season, over 100 total yards per game. Really, you're just hoping that this New York Giants offense is going to be able to maintain the level of play that they saw last season. Now, our next guy is going to be Nick Chubb. With Nick Chubb, the floor looks relatively high. I mean, he was a running back 6 last year. Now you have improved quarterback play with Deshaun Watson, while on top of this, you have no Kareem Hunt. Now, to be fair, Nick Chubb is a 28-year-old running back that doesn't have, at least historically, a large role as a pass catcher, but you can expect this to go up ever so slightly this next season, where if you look at 2019 through 2022, the games where Kareem Hunt's played, Nick Chubb has averaged 1.95 targets per game, whereas the games that Kareem Hunt has missed, Nick Chubb has been at 2.93 targets per game. Now, our next guy will be Tony Pollard. Now, yes, you know I've been very hesitant in drafting both Tony Pollard and Ramondre Stevenson this offseason based off, Dalvin, Zeke, Fournette, Hunt, and possibly even JT finding one of those landing spots. Now, looks like Tony Pollard has dodged 2 of those bullets so far. And I would say they were probably the most dangerous bullets in the case for Tony Pollard. So now I'm going to be more confident in drafting Tony Pollard as a running back 1 this next season. Because on paper, he looks like a league winner, right? This running back last year was the running back 9 from a points per game perspective. And now you remove Ezekiel Elliott, who had a massive workload last season. So yeah, now I am comfortable drafting Pollard where we don't have the looming questions of Dalvin or Zeke. Now, our next guy will be Jonathan Taylor, where you have to be a little more comfortable that he's at least back with the team getting rehab on his ankle. Now, he's not actually practicing. Rappaport says his stance has not changed. So you still have the looming question marks with Jonathan Taylor and his availability this next season. Once we know Jonathan Taylor is 100% good to go, which I'm assuming that he will be. I think all these running backs are very limited with the actual amount of leverage that they have. We will move Jonathan Taylor ahead of Tony Pollard and possibly ahead of Nick Chubb, depending on the health and situation. Now, our next guy will be Derrick Henry. Now, with Derrick Henry, obviously, he is the outlier of all outliers. This is a running back that for 3 straight seasons now has been a top 5 RB from a points per game perspective. And for 3 straight seasons, he has averaged 121 total yards per game. Now, with that being said, Derrick Henry is now pushing 30. And I want to admit, he is the outlier of all outliers. While we can go through and look through history and say running backs at their age 30 season don't produce, I am still comfortable ranking Derrick Henry as a top 10 option going into this next season. Now, for some historical context, if we go over to look at the RotoViz screener and look at running backs in their age 29 season that just posted something comparable to what Derrick Henry did since the year 2000, you have other elite level RBs. You have Arian Foster, LaShawn McCoy, Marshawn Lynch, and every single one of these running backs either got injured or declined significantly going into their age 30 season. Arian Foster got injured that year. LaShawn McCoy fell from 20 points per game down to 16.5. Curtis Martin fell from 19 points per game down to 15. Marshawn Lynch fell from 19 points per game down to 12. DeMarco Murray fell from 18.5 points per game down to 11.5. Can Derrick Henry be the first running back since the year 2000 with this profile to not get worse going into his age 30 season? It's definitely a possibility. It's all about the price point. If you're in your regular redraft league and someone's going to take Derrick Henry round 1, you should pass. You should not take him there. There are too many red flags. Instead, draft Nick Chubb. Please draft Nick Chubb instead. Now, if you're going to be in an underdog draft, where their drafters understand these red flags with Derrick Henry, and also it's only a half PPR format, I am completely fine with you taking Derrick Henry at the 2-3 turn in those drafts. Hell, in those underdog drafts, I have drafted the hell out of Derrick Henry there. And of course, we are drafting every single night on this live stream. Underdog Fantasy Football drafts, done over 100 days straight at this point, not stopping until 2024. And if you want to hop into draft with us in the live stream, now is the perfect time because they just dropped the Puppy 3 tournament. That's a $5 buy-in, $200,000 first place prize, $1 million prize pool. The best place to get practice in for your main fantasy football draft this next year. We know Underdog's best ball, so no time commitment at all during the year. So I drafted 700 teams and won $150,000 last season. Plus, if you use promo code FLOCK, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. Plus, you'll get our 2023 fantasy football rankings, a free trial to flockfantasy.com. And on top of all this, I worked my butt off to get everybody who's used promo code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy a free Josh Allen pick'em line for week 1 to kick off this NFL season. So please make sure you are taking advantage of that. You can find the link in the live chat description or comment section. But now going over to our next guy, we are going to have Josh Jacobs, With Jacobs, he will jump a tier above this if he is back at training camp and he starts playing, right? I mean, if Jacobs gets back with the team, he is playing and we have no concerns. Jacob jumps Derrick Henry in these rankings, and he's most likely, there as a mid RB1. Now, out of all running backs that are looking to possibly not play this next year, Jacobs would have the most leverage. This is a running back coming off a season where, hell, he just led the NFL in rushing, and he's surprisingly young as well. So him sitting out and missing a year isn't going to be as big of a deal as if Saquon Barkley were to have done it. Now, our next guy will be Travis Etienne. With Travis Etienne, we need to see the continued improvement as a pass catcher. I am encouraged based on the statements that we've had from Etienne this offseason, saying that he understands that running backs to get paid today in the NFL, you have to go out there and you have to catch the ball. He averaged 4 receptions per game his final season at Clemson. Now, he was not involved as a pass catcher this past year in Jacksonville. I think that may change. Of course, Tank Bigsby's going to have a role, but you're not drafting Travis Etienne thinking he's going to see 80 to 90% of the touches out of this backfield. You're drafting Etienne hoping that he gets 70% of the work, while at the same time, this is an elite level offense with a young stud quarterback. Now, our next guy will be Jamair Gibbs. Gibbs looked phenomenal in his preseason debut with the Detroit Lions. Now, with Jamair Gibbs, this is a running back that is the elite level pass catcher that you were most excited about in a full PPR format. If you're playing in a non-PPR, you can move him down just a bit, but he had 44 receptions this past year at Alabama. On top of this, we know the Detroit Lions have an elite offensive line. He is a little bit undersized. That's why we're going to have him this much further than someone like Bijan Robinson, right? But he is an elite level athlete at the same time. He ran a 4.36 40-yard dash. Now, our next guy will be Naji Harris. Naji Harris is not on a good trajectory. If you look at the historical comps for Naji Harris based off his rookie and second year season, the running backs that were good enough as rookies with volume, but then fell in year 2, similar to what we saw with Naji, were James Robinson and Clyde Edwards-Helaire since year 2000. You do not want to be in that company, right? You do not want to see that. Now, what we will say with Naji Harris is this a running back that was dealing with the Liz Frank injury. It's a running back that had a horrendous offensive line. It's a running back that had some of the worst quarterback play in the entire NFL. And now going into this next year, he is not injured. Going into this next season, his offensive line has improved. And going into this next season, Kenny Pickett will most likely be a better quarterback in year 2 than he was in year 1. So while Naji Harris is on a very bad trajectory, I think that we can be fair and say that there are signs that Naji may improve this next season, while at the same time admitting that there are some pretty large red flags with this Naji profile. Now, going over to our next guy, we are going to have Joe Mixon. With Mixon, I'm fine drafting him. I understand some of these 2017 drafted running backs, guys like Leonard Fournette, Dalvin Cook, who we'll talk about in just one second, look like they've fallen off. With Mixon, some of the efficiency metrics have, but underlying, he's still getting volume, right? What I am most impressed about is the man averaged a 15% team target share this past year for the Cincinnati Bengals. 15%. Samaje Perine's now gone. I'm excited about Mixon this next year. Now, we are going to slide Ramondre Stevenson in here. Now, the report coming from Rappaport, Zeke is signing for a deal that is worth up to $6 million. And we can kind of throw the Dalvin Cook signing in here as well, right? Because Breece Hall is going to be right after this. Dalvin Cook signs a deal that is worth up to, I believe, $9 million. I want to put this into context. Saquon Barkley's contract this past year, where Saquon Barkley is, by all accounts, an elite stud running back that is going to be used as a bell cow. Barkley was paid $10 million. Dalvin essentially got the same contract as Barkley, at least from what we can tell right now. I'm sure it's a little bit worse, but it's in the same ballpark. Ezekiel Elliott's not that far off. So the reason I'm putting out these contracts is not to say, oh, you can't draft Ramondre, you can't draft Breece Hall, they're not the starting running backs. Of course, I still think they're the starting running backs. I'm ranking them here 14, 15. But it's to illustrate the fact that these running backs in Ezekiel Elliott and Dalvin Cook are not brought in to be backups. These are running backs that are brought in for very specific roles, and they will eat into the workload and the overall ceiling for both Ramondre Stevenson as well as Breece Hall. Now, I will admit, if you are in a regular redraft league where you know your league mates and they are going to be trading like crazy during the season, and you can go through and look for some buy low candidates at the beginning of the year, some sell high candidates, you probably don't even want to be taking these running backs here. I'm ranking these running backs here because what I'm expecting is I'm expecting those veterans such as Ezekiel Elliott and Dalvin Cook most likely to be fading down the stretch, while the young studs are going to be the ones that prevail at the end of the day. But at the beginning of the season, I'm going to tell you, for our week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4 running back rankings, Stevenson and Hall will probably be lower than this even. I think the beginning of the year, I'm not going to be surprised, for instance, if Dalvin Cook is starting straight up over Breece Hall. If Dalvin Cook's seeing 60% of the work and Breece Hall's only seeing 40%. But these rankings are baking in that long-term upside that I'm specifically trying to chase for the fantasy football playoffs, where I believe Stevenson and Hall will still easily be the clear lead backs in their respective backfields. Now, going over to our next guy, we are going to be looking at Kenneth Walker at 16. With Walker, similar situation to these other backs, right? All these guys would be higher if it wasn't for the added in competition. In the case of Kenneth Walker, it was Zach Charbonnet at the NFL draft in round 2. What I'm a little bit worried about Zach Charbonnet is the man's probably the receiving down back, right? That's most likely what we're going to be dealing with this next season. Now, Aaron Jones will be our next running back at 17. I understand people are a lot higher on Aaron Jones than I am, but at the end of the day, we have overall questions surrounding the Green Bay Packers offense, while at the same time, if we look at these age cliffs and the historical comps that we've had from Aaron Jones going into this next season, every single one of these guys has gotten worse. I mean, Jamal Charles going into 2015, got injured, only played 5 games. Jamal Anderson got injured, only played 3 games. Steven Jackson was able to stay healthy, but fell from 15 points per game down to 12.5. Larry Johnson fell from 16 points per game down to 11.5. Fred Jackson, 13.5 points per game down to 11.5. Chester Taylor, 13 points per game down to 10. Joyke Bell, 13.5 points per game down to 8. Chris Johnson going from 15 points per game down to 7.5. And Darry McFadden going from 12.5 points per game down to 4.5. So I understand Aaron Jones at his peak, obviously an elite level RB. I mean, nobody's going to deny that. But a lot of these other running backs on this list, such as Jamal Charles, Chris Johnson, Darren McFadden, were also elite level running backs at their peak. These are the guys that comped to have a similar age 27 season to Aaron Jones this past year. Now that Aaron Jones going into his age 28 year, plus you have offensive concerns, I'm probably out. Now, our next guy will be Miles Sanders. With Sanders, I am betting on the contract. He got $11 million guaranteed at signing. It's a pretty big deal, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, last time we saw this coaching staff and Miles Sanders link up as well, Miles Sanders was actually involved as a pass catcher. You go back to 2020, there he had an 11.5% team target share, and this has declined, right? Different coaching staff. He had a fewer than 5% team target share this past season. I think Miles Sanders will actually catch the ball more now that he's back with a coaching staff that will use him as a receiver, while at the same time he's back with a quarterback that will look to give dump-offs to the running back. Now, our next guy will be Damien Pierce. With Damien Pierce, hated him last year. Not going to lie to you, I was sitting there going, why the hell would I draft a running back in round 4 that is a day 3 NFL draft pick, that has Davis Mills at quarterback, that we have never seen do anything at the NFL level? Now, I was wrong. Damien Pierce was good. Like those truthers that were out there saying, trust me, I watched the film. Damien Pierce looks great. He was underrated. They were correct. I was wrong. Now I'm willing to take that L. I'm willing to say, okay, Damien Pierce is a running back that now just gets a quarterback upgrade with CJ Stroud. He has now proven himself, and the team shows that commitment to him by deciding to only sign Devin Singletary as a backup this past season, not bringing in any real competition and giving him week 1 off of the preseason. So last year, I was not a Damien Pierce guy. This year, 100% I am. Now, J.K. Dobbins is a running back that, going back to what we're talking about with these holdouts, he has no leverage, right? If JT is not going to get a new contract, if Barkley's not going to get a long-term extension, why the hell is J.K. Dobbins going to? I think Dobbins is beginning to realize this. Dobbins is back at practice. You can see him here. With this being said, this is a running back that's not going to have involvement as a pass catcher, knowing Lamar just doesn't dump off the running backs because Lamar can run it himself. Running back 34 this past year from a points per game perspective, but clearly you have to be a little bit more excited about improvement now that he's fully removed from the torn ACL. Now, Alexander Madison will be our next guy. Alexander Madison at one point in the offseason was my most drafted running back on Underdog because we were getting him in round 9 before the Dalvin Cook news. But with Madison, now, he's more so reasonably priced, right? He's a running back that has been given a 3-down workload in games that Dalvin Cook has missed. He has averaged 20 points per game. He's averaged 19.5 rushing attempts per game, and he has averaged about 4 receptions per game at the same time. So with Alexander Madison, you're pretty damn excited about the overall upside that we have seen in those very small instances. But at the same time, we've never seen Madison have that kind of workload throughout the course of the entire season. And I do think that the Minnesota Vikings are a possible contender bringing in someone like Leonard Fournette or Kareem Hunt this next year. Now, our next tier, we are going to have Cam Akers at 22. With Akers, I understand a lot of people are going to say this is way too low because he finished the season strong last year. Well, Cam Akers running back 39 from a points per game perspective this past season. The Los Angeles Rams are supposed to be a very bad team. If you're looking at their expected win total, they're supposed to win 6.5 games this next season. So a running back that has never really had a role as a pass catcher at the NFL level. He's only averaged 1.1 targets per game. So of course, I'm expecting continued improvement now that he is further removed from the torn Achilles, while at the same time, he really has nobody behind him on the depth chart. But I mean, I don't know if I'm going to rank him much higher than running back 22. Now, our next guy will be Javonte Williams. Javonte, great news. Looks like he's going to go at the beginning of the season. Now, to be completely fair, I mean, the man destroyed his knee, right? So if he destroys his knee, even if he's going to be back at the beginning of the year, I'm not expecting Javonte Williams by any means to be that true bell cow elite level running back. It's probably going to take him some time to work into his 100% self, which I would expect in the second half of the year, but he's not going to be someone that you just can't start at all at the beginning of the season, right? He'll at least be out there and he'll be on the field. Now, DeAndre Swift will be our next guy at 24. Swift will be running behind the best offensive line in the NFL. I mean, you really have just question marks alongside him with Rashad Penny and Kenneth Gainwell. With that being said, DeAndre Swift's a running back that only averaged 7 carries per game this past season, and he makes his bread and butter as a receiver. He averages 5.13 targets per game over the past 3 seasons, but if you look at the historical data, the issue is these rushing quarterbacks, such as Jalen Hurts, they don't dump the ball off to running backs at a high clip. The reason being is when the pocket collapses, instead of their last resort just being, okay, well, let's just be Phillip Rivers and let's dump it off to Austin Ekeler out of the backfield. Let's be Drew Brees. I can't move. We're just going to have to dump it off to Alvin Kamara. I'm Tom Brady. I can't move. I'm going to have to give the ball to James White or Leonard Fournette. No, Jalen Hurts can go out there and run it himself. Jalen Hurts can go pick up that first down. So it's not a supernatural fit, right, for that receiving down back to be paired up with that rushing quarterback. But you can clearly see the upside given the talent that you have from DeAndre Swift, while at the same time, the offensive line and the fact this team's probably going to lead the NFL in rushing this next year. Now, our next guy will be David Montgomery. Elite offensive line, but he has a cap ceiling with Jamair Gibbs. Jamair Gibbs is going to be the receiving down back. The primary question is, will David Montgomery have the red zone role, right? Because if Jamair Gibbs is not used inside the 10-yard line, and you expect this to be a good Detroit Lions offense this next season with an elite level offensive line, you could possibly see a pseudo Jamal Williams type year this next season for David Montgomery, just in terms of the overall touchdown volume. Now, the issue is, what happens if they decide to turn Jamair Gibbs truly into Alvin Kamara, and they give Gibbs not only every high value touch as a receiver, but also every high value touch inside the red zone as well. So if you're drafting David Montgomery, you're essentially making a bet that Gibbs won't be involved inside the 10, whereas David Montgomery is going to have that role similar to the Swift Jamal situation last year. Now, going over to our next guy, we are going to look at James Conner. Back-to-back running back 1 finishes. But the issue is right now, if you look at Las Vegas win totals, they have the Arizona Cardinals as the worst team in the NFL. They have the Arizona Cardinals at 4.5 wins this next season. This is supposed to be one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. You don't know when Kyler Murray's coming back. James Conner is an aging RB. So if James Conner was on a better team, if he wasn't on the worst team in the NFL for this next year, trust me, I would have James Conner way higher than this, right? I mean, if you were to go through and say replace James Conner and Joe Mixon, swap them teams, I would probably have James Conner ranked as a top 15 running back in fantasy. There's a big difference between being on like the Bengals and being on the Cardinals. Now, our next guy will be Dalvin Cook. And I want to reiterate, I expect Dalvin Cook to have a larger role at the beginning of the season. So if you're playing in a league where you are not going to be making trades throughout the course of the year, this is where I would rank Dalvin Cook. Because by the time we get to the end of the season, I expect Breece Hall to be the starting running back, and I expect Dalvin Cook to have a severely capped ceiling. However, if you are playing in a league where you know everybody's going to be super active trading, and if you draft Dalvin Cook, here's a low-end RB2, and he starts the first month as the starting running back for the New York Jets, and then you can sell him high in week 3, in week 4, I think I would actually move Dalvin Cook considerably up these rankings. So it's very much going to be dependent on the league activity on where you want to draft Dalvin, and if you think you can take him as a sell high candidate at the beginning of the year. Now, James Cook will be our next RB. Sounds like James Cook is just crushing Damien Harris in training camp. Sounds like Cook's 100% the starting running back. Still a little bit concerned about the size. Cook's never going to be a running back that can see 20 touches every single game, but he's a running back that can be involved as a pass catcher and hopefully get some work in the red zone, right? I mean, historically speaking, we haven't seen running backs that have this exact frame have high access to touchdowns. But, I mean, when you're in the Buffalo Bills offense, there are going to be more than enough touchdowns to go around. Now, Isaiah Pacheco is going to be our next guy. I've drafted a ton of Isaiah Pacheco. Clearly not healthy right now, but at the end of the day, on paper, he is the starting running back for the Kansas City Chiefs. And similar to Tony Pollard, I think you have to slowly start moving Isaiah Pacheco up as you're seeing these signings such as Ezekiel Elliott and Dalvin Cook. Because now really the only added in competition the Chiefs can go for are discount guys like Kareem Hunt, Leonard Fournette, which are still definitely a possibility, right? Like I'm not going to be that surprised if Kareem Hunt is the Kansas City Chief by the time we get to the start of the season. But as it stands now, I'm all in with Isaiah Pacheco and his current price tag in underdog drafts. Now, Rashad White will be our next guy. I understand if you're in a full PPR format, Rashad White has a floor that is higher than this. Rashad White's floor is higher than where we're ranking him right now. But I'm specifically ranking these RBs for the ceiling case. Rashad White is going to be in one of the worst offenses in the entire NFL this next season. Rashad White was one of the least efficient rushers in the entire NFL this past year. But with that being said, will I be surprised if he ends up getting 6 targets per game this next year? No. So if you're in a full PPR format, I'm fine if you really want to take Rashad White higher than this. And then Alvin Kamara will be our next guy. With Alvin Kamara, it's also going to be very dependent on how active your leagues is with trading, right? Are we that excited to take Alvin Kamara and then have to keep him on our bench through the first 3 weeks and not really be able to make any waiver wire moves? Probably not. Now, if you can draft Alvin Kamara and while he's suspended for the first 3 weeks, then at that point, put him on your injured reserve and still have access to making all those waiver wire moves at the beginning portion of the season. In that style format, I will 100% move Alvin Kamara up. But you really have to plan this out. Are you going to have to lock up a bench spot on your roster through the first month of the season for Alvin Kamara? Or are you going to be able to draft him, put him on your IR, and then still have all the flexibility on the waiver wire? Now, I think that's all we have for this video. Again, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for checking it out. And of course, if you play fantasy football, you better go down there, drop a like, subscribe to the channel. And if you want to get into a draft with us, we are drafting every single night on the live stream on Underdog Fantasy. You can find the link in the description, in the comment section of this video. Promo code FLOCK is going to get you a 100% deposit match up to $100. Plus, you're going to get our 2023 fantasy football rankings, a free trial to flockfantasy.com where you can find our 2023 fantasy football draft guide. And I worked my butt off to get y'all the free Josh Allen pick'em line for week 1. It's going to be available for only people who use promo code FLOCK. And that's going to be available even if you use promo code FLOCK 2 years ago, tomorrow, next week. It doesn't matter. But again, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I really do appreciate you and really hope that I get to see you out with the live stream tonight.